Welcome to the Tattooed Truth Podcast with Anna Love, a space for embodied conversations for soul-led rebels. I'm your host, Anna Love, intuitive empowerment coach, subconscious healing guide, and no stranger to burning it all down to rise in truth. Here, we dive deep into identity, healing, personal power, and what it really takes to lead a soul-aligned life. You'll hear unfiltered insights, real stories, and live coaching sessions with bold callers ready to break free and embody their next level. This is your invitation to reclaim your voice, rewire your patterns, and rise fully expressed. Let's get into it. Welcome to our episode on relationships. And this is the Tattooed Truth Podcast. And here we talk about things that are going on in real time. So I'd like to explore and divulge what happened to me in my most recent relationship of 2 years, literally exactly the same week that we met 2 years ago, we ended the relationship. And there was a previous ending in June. So it's August at the time of this recording. And we had a 6-week breakup in between. So let's dive in. Today's episode is really all about patterns and how we allow them to run the show in our relationship. And patterns are simply beliefs or decisions or any type of negative emotion that we're holding on to that was either modeled to us or, someone said something directly to us, or we absorbed a belief or a negative emotion indirectly. And it forms who we are, forms our opinions about ourselves. It forms our opinions about the world and other people. And most importantly, it creates our reality. And when we get inside relationships, we have to realize that we are in the relationship with all of the different and various parts of ourselves, right? Including our inner child, including the parts of our inner child that is still locked in the back, right? Like locked in the basement somewhere. They are 5 years old. They are 8 years old. They're 15 years old, right? And they're there. They're waiting to be seen, to be nurtured, to be loved, to unburden whatever happened to them, whatever event came in and created like this little trauma for them, or they're a big trauma. They've been waiting for years. Okay. And what happens when our parts are waiting for years is they are in isolation. However, they have these beliefs that we as our self energy do not care about them, that they are not important. Okay. And they continue to show up in our life. So we could be 30, 40, 50 years old, and our inner child is still showing up when we are at our most vulnerable, right? When we are trying to have a relationship with someone. And so your parts and your shadows, which that's what it's called when your inner parts are hiding back there in the past, that's the shadow. When your parts are intertwined with your partner's parts, okay? So really you think you're having just this relationship with the person you see in front of you, but it's not that, okay? It's not that at all. It's you're dealing with the parts of them that they haven't bothered to deal with or handle or help or, work out any of their trauma for years, and same with you. So let's talk about our parts and how they will show up in relationships. They are there to avoid feeling bad again. All right. So there's our inner child part, and then there's protector parts that come in and they say, we are going to scan the environment, scan everything that's going on, and we're going to make sure to put a stop to anything that resembles the trauma from the past. Okay. So it could be, you're all of a sudden procrastinating and you don't know why you're procrastinating. And there's a part of you that is creating procrastination because it believes something about whatever it is that you think you should do, or you actually should do. And it's saying, no, we're going to pump the brakes on that, because if you do that thing, then there's an activated part back here that's going to feel bad. And I'm not going to let that happen. So there's also, that's why people lie. And in my situation with this relationship that I just got out of, that was what was going on. There was a part of him that was like creating a block between him reaching his deepest self, and he became very hard to reach, right? And my biggest value, right? Like why are these shadows a problem, is because they get in the way of us becoming deep with someone. They get in the way of us of talking from our real truthful self. Okay. So, I was going to go into values, but we're going to go into that in a second. I'm going to hold off on that for just a moment. I was going to say that transparency is my number one value, but we're definitely going to get there. So shadows are a problem because, let me ask you some questions. All right. Tell me if any of these events have ever happened in your life. Have you ever been going along and people are saying things to you and you're soaking it up and believing it, and then the rug gets pulled out from under you? And then all of a sudden, that person just broke up with you. And you're like, wait, what? What about what you just said 5 minutes ago? Okay. That's a shadow part running the show that ended it, or that said the things and then ended it. Have you ever been told one thing by someone's words, but then they turn around and do different actions? Okay. That's a shadow part. Have you ever felt that the person that you're with is holding back information from you, or that they are not being transparent fully, right? Like maybe they're not directly lying to you, but they're holding back information, and you know this because you could feel it, right? Have you ever overrode your own intuition? Have you? Have you? That's my shadow. Okay. These are all red flags. If they're going on in your relationship, or they went on in a relationship before, there's a big red flag waving in front of your face that the inner child is running the show. Okay. The inner child is calling all the shots, making all the decisions, right? Either it's a reaction or it's a response, but either way, the person standing in front of you is not making the decisions. Okay. It appears that they are. So let me ask you a couple more. Have you ever stayed in a relationship longer than you knew was good for you? I know that I've done that. I was in an 8-year relationship, a 15-year relationship, this 2-year relationship. I was in some other ones too, but all 3 of them I stayed in longer than I knew what was good for me, because I liked aspects of those people, right? There were things that I liked, and I said, oh, this isn't so bad. And you downplay the things that are so bad. Have you ever done that before? Okay, this is shadows. These are your inner children running the show, right? So the thing about, now we'll get into the values. The thing about values, okay, it's what makes people click or what creates conflict. So values are basically, what if I were to say to you, like, what do you value in life? Okay, for me, financial freedom. So I value money, love and connection. I value that. Transparency. That means that we talk about everything, even if it's uncomfortable, even if we're used to hiding it and we don't think the other person is going to like us. When we say these things, we're going to say it anyway, because it's better to be truthful and honest than it is to hide things away. Okay, these are values. I value transparency. Now, if your partner doesn't value these things, then you have a conflict. All right. If your partner values them, but they're at a lower level, and maybe you value transparency up here in number 1, but your partner values it down at number 20. Okay. You can see how that's a huge issue. All right. You need to be figuring out, what are the values of the person that you're dating? What are the values of you? And how similar, okay, how similar are they? And there's ways to move the values, like you can move them up and you can move some down. You can create like the gap to close so that you get along. But if you're not being communicative over these things, then hey, that's not going to work. So one of the things that, we did inside of our relationship is we would talk about this. I would talk about this. We read a book together about it, about transparency and how to, a good relationship is all about, not leaving anything out. And I thought he was on board with that. Okay. But his shadow wasn't on board with that. So he was consciously telling me, yeah, yes, 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 sure. But his shadow was still in the background going, oh, that's too scary. I feel like I can't do that. Right. But nobody knows, at least especially me, didn't know that was going on. So I felt that, there were a couple things in our relationship where I could have said, excuse me, like, what's going on over here? Can we talk about this more? But I did do that. However, I didn't push it, right? I wanted to accept his response that whatever I was noticing was no big deal. I wanted to be unbothered. Okay. I didn't want to pick at him. I didn't want to say, well, I feel something different. And I feel like you're not telling me the truth. Right. So I didn't, but then there's a shadow there for me. I didn't want to cause confrontation. All right. So guess what? We dated for 2 years. We didn't have our first fight until 1 year, 10 months. And it was like, I can't remember what it was. And then we had another one the week after. We were in an airport and had a fight. That was like I was steaming hot and I had never been this way with him before, right? And then the third one is what broke us up. And we realized that our values were so out of whack in terms of spirituality and whatnot. And we decided to part ways. Okay. So we amicably decided to part ways. However, there was something there. And I said, I feel like you're running away, like you're running. And I feel like there's something else. What am I missing? Is there another girl? Is there something you're not telling me? And he's like, no, none of that. No. Right. So I go, okay, I guess that's just your, coping mechanism when you're in a state of hyper vigilance is to run, right? Because we usually fight, which we weren't fighters, obviously. Well, he's a fighter and I'm a fighter, but we weren't fighters with each other. Or we freeze, okay, or we start appeasing, or we run. And so he ran, and then he got real quiet and he just shipped my stuff back in a box, like literally like a day later. And I was like, that is so abrupt. There's something else going on, right? Like, what's going on? And in my body, I was like, I know there's something going on. But what can you do? Right. At that point, you just go, oh, well, and this is over. Right. And it was over and it was fine. And I was like, wow, let's just move on, living my best life, learned a lot from that, and very glad that, it's done, like moving on, very happy. And we went, several weeks without talking to one another. And then he pops back in, maybe 6 weeks later saying that he understands that he was the one to have sabotaged this. It wasn't my fault. He does it with everything. And, he realizes I wasn't asking him to change by being, looking at some books or some podcasts or whatever it was, like expanding your horizon in a growth mindset way, right? That was the problem. I was growth mindset. He wasn't. And I was like, I can't be with someone like this. And he was like, you know what? 6 weeks later, he was like, you know what? I'm good. Like, let's get back together. And I was like, but the things, they're still in the middle of the room, right? The elephant's still there. What are we going to do about it? Right. And he's like, no. I'm going to get some coaching and I'm going to just expand my horizon. I realize you're not changing me. And so I felt very hopeful. I trusted his word. Okay. And I trusted that the universe led him back to me because he had a realization that, this was what he wanted. All right. And his words, from that point on over the next 2 weeks, his words were really, really telling me, have you guys ever had this? I'm just dying to know. I'd love to know, have other people had this same exact issue or little pieces of what I'm saying? Am I ringing a bell for you? Well, so what proceeds to happen after, I think, like 2 or 3 weeks is that, within his coaching experience, he was starting to peel back the layers, which is what we do. And I had jokingly said, like, hey, when you start coaching, you may not even like me. Like, how about you, like, why don't you go get coaching and then come back? How about you do that? Like, I even suggested that because we don't know what's underneath all that. We don't know of years and years and years and decades of holding things down like a beach ball, right? Like repressing our truest self and essence and saying, you're not good enough to come up here in the real world. Let's keep you in the shadows, right? We don't know what we're actually going to like or what we're going to be like when we come out. And he was like, no, 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 I would never leave you. You're my person. Like, we're going to be together for the next 50 years. And, you know, call number 2 with his coach, he actually starts to find his voice and he surprises me because, like I said, the past 3 weeks before that, he had been, professing his love for me, just obsessed in a way that like felt really loving and good. And he then drops the bomb that, he feels compelled that he has to be truthful. And he realizes that he's been doing half truths his whole life and he has to end that. And the first thing he's going to do is let me know that he's been sleeping with a friend of his for the last 6 weeks. And I say, well, we weren't together. So I already had an intuition that you liked her anyway. And I remember when I brought it up several times in our relationship and you denied it and got snippy with me and you like tried to pretend it wasn't true. I was like, and I knew it was. And I knew she liked you too. I was like, yeah. So I figured, when we were broken up, that's exactly what you'd go do. And I'm not surprised. And I said, but what's the problem now? I said, and he said, well, the problem is that I want to be with her, not you. And I said, what about like earlier today when you were telling me how much you love me? What about yesterday and all the days before that? What about like 2 days ago when you were over in my house? Like, what about all that? And he was like, yeah, she's just a better fit for me. And you know that as well as I do. And I was like, okay. So his deepest desires came out, and, they had been being held in for 2 years because, trust me, when he brought me around to the two of them 2 years prior when we first met, I could tell right then and there that they liked each other, but she was married at the time. And, that's besides the point. I think what's important is that I knew it and I should have left right then and there. So I think for me, the intuition part, he wasn't owning his desires and I intuitively knew that. But guess what I did? My part in this was that I overrode my intuition and I said, well, if he's not admitting it, then it must not be true, right? I trusted his word over my own intuition. And guess what, guys? I've done this before in all my other relationships, right? So there's work to do for me there. And I'd love to know if this is, again, ringing a bell for you. Do you have a fear of not wanting to rock the boat, of not wanting to have confrontation? Do you have a fear that your intuition is wrong? And I'm here to tell you it's not the case. Your intuition is on point. And I truly believe that, God, the universe heard some conversations that were going on that I did not hear. I wasn't privy to. So he ended this relationship both times because I didn't have all of the information, right? And I was not listening to my guidance. So he ended it for me 2 times, not one, but 2. And that's what I trust now. So this roller coaster ride has been, like everything else is in my life, a challenge so that I can evolve to my highest, right? And that's what we're here for. I believe that this partner and I called each other in to get to a place of needing each other to evolve to the next level. Maybe him in finding his truthfulness and his voice, and maybe a few other things as he continues his coaching journey. Maybe with me, it's really getting that trust myself above anybody else, right? And don't let fear from loss or fear from abandonment, because that was one of my things. Didn't want to be abandoned in relationships. And so I feared that. And so I would stick around longer than I needed to. So this is how patterns show up from our childhood into our relationship. And They run the show. They dictate our actions. They create our reality. And it's up to us. I'm a true believer that it wasn't our fault that this all happened, right? This wasn't our fault, but it is our responsibility. And I've said it before, and I'll continue to say it's our responsibility to heal and to change those patterns, okay, to ones that are more empowering for us so that we can be living in our true purpose, our essence. We can't get there and we can't be that best version of ourselves when our shadows are lurking. So let's just say that there's the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual realms that we all need fulfilled. And for me, I was only getting 2 of those 4, and I knew it and I stayed anyway. And from now on, that's just not going to lower my standards to that. I'm going to say, like, these are the things that I need. And yeah, I'd love to hear if you just want to like let me know on my Instagram your comments or your questions that you have. And we're going to have another podcast that is going to be talking about some deeper things with my new co-host, and we're going to be introducing her soon. So stay tuned. This is going to be exciting moving forward. And I'm so thrilled that you are listening. Ciao. Thanks for tuning in to the Tattoo Truth Podcast. If this episode lit something up in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, leave a review, and make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a truth bomb. If you're craving deeper support, guided healing, or a space to reclaim your voice and power, check the show notes for ways to work with me. Remember, your truth is not too loud, too bold, or too much. It's exactly what this world needs. Keep showing up, stay wild, stay true. I'll see you next time.